Hey guys, and welcome back to another Enshrouded video, this time breaking down just over 12 tips and tricks for creating better builds in Enshrouded. And we're going to cover all the tips that you need to create a beautiful little house, as well as more advanced techniques that you can use to make it stand out more. So this video may be pushed towards the simpler build systems at first, but there should be tips that will help anyone who is interested in experimenting with the amazing build system that Enshrouded has to offer. So if you do find this video helpful, do let me know what you'd like me to cover in the next one, and we're just going to jump straight into it. Now, as with all builds, the first thing to bear in mind is where you'll be building. Leveling the space with either a rake or using the build hammer and selecting the terrain tool to delete layers of the earth around you is a great way to clear space. However, for larger clearing, you're going to want to place down a large foundation and then delete the space manually, as this is going to save you a lot of time rather than removing it layer by layer or using the pickaxe. Now, it can be difficult when building to judge how much space that you're going to need for these builds, so I highly recommend giving yourself a little bit more space than you expect you're going to need for it, so that if you need to, you can expand later. Obviously, you are limited by the flame altar and the size that you can build from that, but as you upgrade the flame altar, you'll have more space. So it's more about where you're placing the build within that space than the space that's available in the altar. Now, once the space is prepared, it's time to place your foundations. This is the perfect time to build out a cellar if you'd like for your build. Now, I personally find that 3x4 foundations is a great starting size for a small house. However, if you're looking to have a build that has a nice aesthetic to it, maybe it's a mirrored build, then you'll probably want to go with something a little bit bigger, such as a 3 deep by 5 wide foundation build. Now, for the ground level, I do normally start with some kind of stone foundation. I look for inspiration at various older buildings, and I think having a stone foundation is a great way to kind of border your build. But where possible, I do recommend playing around with different build materials. So as you get further into this game, you'll come across more materials and building blocks to use in your world, and it's always worth experimenting with different combinations, as they can really work well together. Such as, for example, here, the half timbered block and the wooden pieces. These can also be a great way to break up each of the floors in your house, providing you don't do a different material across 6 or 7 different floors. That might look a little bit weird. But on the whole, playing around with different materials is a great way to play with the style of your base design. Now, I should mention, often when you use just a single build material, it can make your buildings look quite flat. So I highly recommend, along with playing around with different materials and combining them together, but also playing around with depth to add extra detail. You can do this with layering other build pieces along a wall, whether that's for little alcoves or adding a balcony to the build, or even trimming around the base of your walls or beams across the ceiling. All of this can do wonders for making the build really stand out and pop. Now, here's a fun tip that you may not know about, but the magic chests do actually allow you to pull items from them when crafting. But this works with buildings too, although at the moment it seems to be a little bit quirky. You have to make sure that you have at least one of the building blocks that you want to use in your backpack when building. If so, it will pull that resource from the chests, but only if you have that single block there. And you'll need to do this for every single build block that you want to play around with. Also, don't feel that your whole build needs to look great. Often spending time on just a couple of key focal points in your build can make the build really stand out without having to spend dozens of hours making each section look great. Just a bonus tip whilst I'm building this. When you place your flame, I always do this, don't place it in the center of your build, because you'll find that it takes up so much room. Thankfully, if you have a spare slot available, you can hide it somewhere, such as behind your build, or maybe make it part of your build elsewhere, so that it doesn't take as much room, and we can fill this in and make this a nice little living room area. There we go. One of the biggest pain points I've found in Enshrouded and for other players in Enshrouded is the placing of rooftops. And though I don't have any specific tips for you when it comes to placing your own roofs, except using the snapping system where possible, what I will mention is that in addition to the build blocks that we have in the game, we can also use roofing blocks to build. Because of the voxel nature, you can actually get some really interesting designs when using these roofing blocks instead of build blocks. And if you place them in diagonals, you can get some really nice borders around windows. You can stack them to create interesting columns in your build. Just play around with it and see what you come up with. Now, once you've got the shell of the house built, I do highly recommend look at the garden and fencing. This is the frame around your build and can really make the build feel nestled in place. Use wooden beams to create planters, plant different types of seeds to add colour to your builds. And it doesn't stop there. You can use the rake to build pathways if using the build block doesn't appeal to you. And it's worth noting that the rake is also a great way to spread farm soil without having to place extra soil down. Now, alongside build blocks, we do have dozens of items that can be used, such as windows for fencing. But if you think out of the box and play around with mixing build blocks and these buildable pieces, you can clip them together to create some incredible design pieces, such as trellises in the garden and fencing around the border. You can also experiment with elements inside your house, like better looking fireplaces using fire pits or dedicated storage designs and sinks. It all comes down to playing around with what you've got available. However, you can push this much further now, as some of the buildables have multiple rotations or fine rotations that you can use. So to activate this, you have to press R and then right click, and you have these extra rotation options available to you. This can be great for creating ceiling pieces with windows or playing around and adding new floor types. Experimenting is the key, as I keep mentioning, and you'll be surprised at just how much freedom you have with the build system in Enshrouded. I honestly think this is one of the best build systems I've ever played with. Now, once you're happy with the overall design, it is worth noting that there's also a foliage and decay tool. These can make your builds feel aged or being recaptured by the wild. Now, it's not necessarily a look for everyone, but a little touch here and there can really elevate your designs. And finally, just a little bonus tip would be to play around with the luminescent blocks that we have available. These can add a touch of atmosphere to your builds. Often I'll hide these luminescent blocks between other build pieces, allowing a slither of light to bleed through. But you don't have to just use luminescent blocks. There are also a wealth of lights available to you to use in your build. So just experiment and have fun, and then fill the house with props. We have so many available to play around with that it can make it look really lived in. So there you are, 12 plus tips for better base building design in Enshrouded. I do hope you liked this video, and if you have a favorite tip that you want to share, let us know in the comments below what it is. But guys, until next time, as always, ciao for now.